Texas runs one of the strictest, most quietly controlled inmate transport systems in the United States. But when it comes to death row, everything becomes even more secretive. These transfers don't happen by chance. They follow hidden rules, carefully selected routes, and a level of security designed to eliminate every possible risk. This is the part of the prison system the public never sees. The early morning movements, the coded instructions, the specialized teams, and the narrow window of time where a single mistake could change everything. Before these inmates ever reach a courtroom, a medical unit, or a high-security facility like Polunsky or Huntsville, Texas goes through a transport process that is tightly controlled, heavily restricted, and built around one purpose: absolute containment. Before we dive in, hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe to HFD Achieve Crimes. Every bit of support helps us reveal the hidden truths behind the world's prisons and crime documentaries. Now let's go inside. A death row transfer in Texas does not begin on the road. It begins days earlier, inside an office where movement requests are reviewed by a small group of officials. Every transfer, no matter how routine it seems, must be justified on paper. Medical trips, court hearings, disciplinary moves, and emergency evaluations all go through a multi-step approval system. The inmate's risk level is checked, their behavioral history is re-examined, and the specific purpose of the move is logged. Nothing is done quickly, and nothing is done without a trail. Once the approval is given, the process shifts to the officers in charge of transportation. These aren't regular guards. Texas uses specialized staff trained to handle high-risk inmates who cannot be transported like the general prison population. Their schedules are changed quietly, their gear is prepared without announcement, and their briefing is kept away from open areas inside the unit. Even inside the prison, not everyone knows when death row is about to move. The inmate selected for transport is placed on a restricted list. Their meals, movements, and interactions are closely watched. The prison begins controlling every variable around them. Officers double-check their restraints, escort logs, and recent behavior reports. Even something as small as a broken hinge on a restraint or a missing signature can delay the entire operation. Inside the administrative wing, transportation supervisors create the route plan. Texas never uses the same pattern repeatedly. The chosen path depends on road conditions, weather, public events, and potential risks. Highways, side roads, and backup paths are all mapped out. Only a few people ever see the actual route, and even fewer know the backup routes in case something goes wrong. The timing is just as controlled as the route. Most death row transports begin before sunrise, when movement across the prison is at its lowest. This reduces the chances of distractions, disruptions, or any kind of attention. On the outside, early morning roads have lighter traffic, giving officers more control over the environment. For death row, secrecy and timing are a form of security. On the day before transport, the inmate is quietly removed from normal housing patterns. Their cell is checked, their restraints are inspected, and every officer involved meets for a final briefing. During this meeting, the inmate's full history is reviewed: past violence, gang affiliations, escape attempts, medical needs, and any previous incidents during transport. This ensures that the entire team knows exactly who they're moving. Nothing about this step is rushed. Texas understands that a death row inmate transfer carries risk at every stage. One officer losing focus, one door not fully secured, one small miscommunication. Any of these can create a dangerous situation. That is why the preparation phase is the longest part of the entire process. Before the inmate is even let out of their cell, dozens of decisions have already been made behind the scenes. By the time the morning of the move arrives, everything has already been locked into place. The team knows the schedule. The vehicles are fueled and checked. Backup units are positioned at key points along the route. And inside the unit, one inmate is waiting, fully shackled, heavily restrained, and surrounded by officers whose job is not only to maintain control, but to ensure that the entire operation stays invisible to the outside world. This is where the transfer truly begins, in silence, in planning, and in a system built to move the state's most dangerous inmates without leaving any space for error. Once a death row transfer is officially scheduled, the inmate is placed under a quiet but strict form of pre-transfer isolation. This is not punishment, it is risk control. Texas prisons treat any upcoming movement of a high-risk inmate as a potential vulnerability, so the system tightens around them long before they step outside the cell block. First, the inmate's daily routine changes. They no longer attend outdoor recreation, they no longer move through the hallway routes used by other inmates, and they no longer receive standard dayroom access. Every movement becomes escorted, logged, and monitored. Officers assigned to these escorts are handpicked based on experience and familiarity with death row protocols. Nothing is left to chance. Inside the cell, officers conduct a full shakedown. They remove anything that could be manipulated into a weapon, tool, or distraction. Even small items, like broken pens or metal food trays, are inspected. The cell is photographed, documented, and sealed after the search. For the next 24 to 72 hours, only designated officers are allowed contact. This isolation isn't only about physical safety, it's about information control. Death row inmates are constantly monitored for communication attempts. A transfer schedule leaking inside the unit could create unpredictable reactions. To prevent this, the inmate's outgoing mail is paused, their phone access is temporarily restricted, and their conversations with others are minimized. The fewer people who know about the movement, the lower the risk. During this period, the transport team begins rehearsing the extraction process. The route from the cell door to the sally port must be practiced, timed, and double-checked. Officers walk each step of the path, confirming door locks, camera coverage, and potential blind spots. If any point along this route is deemed unsafe or poorly monitored, the path gets changed immediately. A separate team prepares the restraint devices. Death row transport requires a full set of heavy-duty restraints, handcuffs, leg irons, belly chains, sometimes a black box cover to limit hand mobility. Each item is inspected for wear, tested for strength, and labeled with officer initials. Texas does this because restraint failure, even once, is unacceptable in a death row movement. Meanwhile, the facility enters what staff refer to as a soft lockdown. Unrelated inmate movements are reduced. Shift schedules are adjusted. Units near the transport path are temporarily restricted. Medical staff are notified to clear hallways. Even kitchen workers might be told to delay food carts to keep the walkway empty. All of this is done quietly, without announcing the reason. The inmate at the center of this operation remains unaware of the exact hour they will move. Officers do not tell them. This prevents anticipation, agitation, or any attempt at manipulation. When it's time, the inmate is taken by surprise, not in a violent way, but in a controlled, fast, predictable sequence that limits reaction time. Psychologically, this phase is intense. The inmate knows something is coming. The sudden isolation, the increased officer presence, the quiet tension in the hallway, all are signals. Some inmates become restless. Others become unusually calm. Veteran officers watch these reactions closely, adjusting their approach if necessary. Every officer involved understands that the hours before a transfer are the highest risk period. Most assaults, escape attempts, or resistance happen inside the unit, not during the vehicle ride. That is why Texas uses preparation as its strongest defense. By reducing movement, controlling contact, and eliminating uncertainty, the system closes every gap before it opens the cell door. By the end of this phase, the prison is fully staged. Doors are secured. Officers are in position. Communication radio channels are set to exclusive use. The path from the cell to the transport vehicle is clear and controlled. All that remains is the moment when the door opens, the moment when isolation ends, and the extraction begins. The extraction is the most carefully choreographed moment in a Texas death row transfer. It is the exact point where planning, isolation, and secrecy meet physical movement. Every officer involved knows that these few minutes carry the highest risk of the entire operation. Inside the cell block, tension rises long before the door opens. Extraction begins with a silent formation outside the inmate cell. The team usually consists of 5 to 8 officers trained in high-risk movements. Each one has a specific role: lead officer, restraints officer, escort officers, rear security, and a supervisor monitoring for any break in protocol. No one steps out of position, and no one speaks unless necessary. Before anything happens, the hallway is cleared. Doors leading to nearby cells are secured. Cameras are checked to ensure the entire extraction is recorded from start to finish. Texas does this not only for safety, but also for accountability. A death row inmate is considered one of the state's highest-risk individuals, so every second must be documented. The lead officer approaches the cell quietly and gives a short, direct command for the inmate to cuff up. This happens through the food slot or small cuffing port built into the door. Even though the inmate is already in isolation, extraction requires an added layer of safety. The inmate must place their hands behind their back and allow restraints to be attached before the door opens. If the inmate refuses, officers follow a step-by-step protocol designed to reduce resistance without escalating force. Once handcuffs are secured, additional restraints follow: a belly chain, a lockbox cover to limit hand movement, and leg irons. These restraints are attached while the door remains closed, with multiple officers verifying that everything is locked correctly. No restraint is ever trusted without inspection. When the door finally opens, it happens in one smooth movement. Officers position themselves to control space, body angles, and the inmate's line of movement. The inmate is instructed to step back and turn away from the door. Every officer watches closely, not because they expect violence every time, but because history has shown that this is the moment when unexpected actions can happen. As the inmate steps out, escort officers take their positions on both sides. Their grip points are trained and deliberate, controlling the upper arm, shoulder, or restraint chain depending on the inmate's behavior. Even if the inmate is cooperative, the formation never changes. Professional distance is maintained, and no unnecessary conversation takes place. From the cell block to the hallway, the route is controlled down to the second. Every door ahead of the escort team is opened only when the team arrives, then immediately locked after they pass. This prevents interference, surprise contact, or accidental access. Officers posted along the route act as spotters, watching for anything unusual. A supervisor follows close behind with a radio line dedicated exclusively to the extraction team. They call out movements, confirm clear passages, and alert the sally port officers that the escort is approaching. This level of communication ensures that the team never loses control of timing or space. Inside the inmate's mind, this moment is heavy. Many have experienced transfers before, but death row movements carry a different weight. Some stay silent and focused. Others show nervousness, anger, or resignation. Officers are trained to maintain calm regardless of the inmate's emotional state. As the team moves toward the sally port, the secure garage where transport vehicles wait, the environment becomes quieter. Fewer staff are present, and only essential personnel remain in the area. This is intentional. Reducing foot traffic reduces risk. The final step of extraction is transferring the inmate from hallway escort to vehicle loading. The inmate is positioned in a controlled stance while officers adjust restraints, check locks again, and prepare for seating. This triple check is standard. Texas has learned that the smallest overlooked detail can become the biggest safety issue during a transport. By the time the inmate reaches the vehicle door, the most dangerous part of the extraction is over. But the level of control does not drop. If anything, it tightens. The inmate is now one step away from leaving the safety of the unit and entering the unpredictable open road. Texas treats death row transport restraints as a complete security system, not just metal cuffs and chains. Each piece is chosen, inspected, and applied in a sequence designed to eliminate movement, reduce leverage, and prevent even the smallest opportunity for resistance. By the time a death row inmate reaches the transport vehicle, they are secured in a way that reflects the highest risk classification the system recognizes. Restraints begin long before the inmate steps into the sally port. After extraction, officers stop at a controlled holding point where every restraint is checked again. This includes handcuffs, belly chains, leg irons, and the black box cover that limits wrist rotation. Texas does not rush these checks. Officers test the tension, inspect each lock, and confirm that nothing has loosened during the walk. Anything that feels even slightly off is replaced immediately. The handcuffs used in death row transfers are not the same lightweight cuffs used in general population movements. They are heavy-duty steel models with minimal tolerance for play. The black box restraint, placed over the chain and lock area, prevents the inmate from manipulating the cuffs with finger pressure. This device forces the hands into a fixed forward position, reducing dexterity to near zero. For inmates with a history of violence or escape attempts, an additional security seal may be applied to confirm the box is never tampered with during the trip. The belly chain adds another layer of control. It wraps around the inmate's waist and connects to the handcuffs, locking the wrists close to the torso. This limits upper body strength and prevents sudden lunges or twisting movements. Officers always double-check that the chain sits below the rib cage, so it cannot be lifted or used for leverage. Leg irons are the final piece of full-body restraint. These heavy ankle cuffs restrict stride length, slowing the inmate's walking pace and stabilizing their center of gravity. Officers make sure the leg irons are tight enough to prevent slipping, but loose enough to avoid cutting circulation during long transport hours. A short connecting chain between the ankles ensures the inmate cannot run, jump, or take wide steps. When all restraints are secured, officers perform a coordinated pull test. This involves multiple officers applying pressure to different restraint points to ensure nothing shifts. A supervisor signs off on the restraints, documenting the time, condition, and officers responsible. This documentation is standard procedure, serving both safety and accountability. For some inmates, additional restraints are used based on threat level. These might include high-security mitts that limit finger movement, a reinforced restraint belt, or a secondary chain connecting the belly chain to the transport seat anchor. Each added device is chosen based on an individual risk assessment. Gang ties, prior assaults, escape attempts, or behavioral instability all play a role. Even after all restraints are confirmed, officers remain alert. A properly restrained inmate can still attempt headbutts, shoulder strikes, or sudden directional shifts. For that reason, escort officers maintain a specific grip technique, one on the upper arm or tricep, the other controlling the chain or restraint point. This prevents unexpected momentum or attempts to pull away. In Texas, the philosophy behind restraints is simple: assume capability, not compliance. Even cooperative inmates are treated with maximum security precautions because the risk is built into the classification, not the moment. As the inmate approaches the transport vehicle, restraints take on a new function: anchoring. Once seated, the restraints are clipped into steel locking points inside the vehicle. The belly chain may be connected to a seat anchor, and leg irons are often secured to the floor. This prevents sliding, leaning, or shifting during turns, stops, or unexpected road events. Only after the inmate is seated, anchored, and secured to the vehicle do officers stand down enough to close the door. The restraint system has now transitioned from hallway control to transport containment, a shift that remains in effect until the inmate arrives at their destination. By the time the vehicle doors shut, every officer knows one thing clearly: a single restraint failure is unacceptable, and Texas designs its system to make sure it never happens. The vehicles used to move Texas death row inmates are more than prison vans. They are mobile security units engineered to control risk while blending into ordinary traffic. On the outside, many of these vehicles look unmarked, plain, and intentionally unremarkable. But inside, they are built like protective cages designed to keep officers safe, inmates contained, and the operation hidden from public attention. Texas typically uses two categories of vehicles for death row transfers: high-security transport vans and reinforced inmate carriers. Which one is selected depends on distance, weather, the inmate's classification, and the sensitivity of the mission. High-security vans appear simple from a distance, usually white, silver, or muted gray, with minimal markings to avoid drawing attention. But behind the tinted windows are reinforced steel compartments divided into separate holding cells. Each compartment has its own locking system, ventilation line, and restraint anchor points. The floors are steel-plated, the seat mounts are welded, and there is no accessible handle, panel, or bolt for an inmate to manipulate. The driver's area is separated by a solid barrier, preventing any direct contact between inmate and officer. Communication, if needed, is done through a small secured intercom that officers control. Every inch of the interior is designed to eliminate opportunity. No loose screws, no removable panels, no exposed wiring, nothing that could be weaponized. For longer routes or higher-risk inmates, Texas may use a reinforced inmate carrier, essentially a small bus with upgraded security. These carriers have multiple compartments, allowing officers to separate inmates by classification or behavior. In a death row transfer, however, the inmate usually rides alone, isolated in the most secure compartment. Officers sit in a separate section, maintaining full visual access but no physical interaction unless necessary. One of the most important features of Texas transport vehicles is redundant locking systems. Every door has multiple locks, electronic, manual, and sometimes keyless systems controlled by the main officer. Even if one mechanism fails, the others remain engaged. The Sallyport garage also adds an extra safety layer. No vehicle door opens unless the outer gate is shut and secured. Another major design element is the restraint anchors inside the vehicle. These are welded steel loops or bars built directly into the frame. Once the inmate is seated, their belly chain or leg irons are clipped into these anchor points. This prevents sliding, lunging, or using momentum to damage the interior. When anchored correctly, the inmate cannot rise from the seat, shift position aggressively, or manipulate restraints. Texas also equips these vehicles with silent communication tools. Officers use encrypted radios that do not broadcast on regular public safety channels. Only designated units, supervisors, and control centers can hear the transmissions. This ensures no one outside of the operation knows when or where the vehicle is moving. The exterior is designed with practicality in mind. Vehicles are regularly serviced, checking brakes, tires, doors, and electrical systems before every high-risk transport. A mechanical issue on the road could create vulnerability, so officers confirm roadworthiness before the inmate is ever loaded. Fuel levels are checked and topped off to avoid unnecessary stops. If refueling becomes unavoidable, officers use specific stations pre-cleared for security. Inside the vehicle, temperature control is also important. In Texas heat, an uncooled steel compartment becomes dangerous. Transport vehicles have powerful ventilation and air conditioning systems designed to maintain stable temperatures during long drives. Officers monitor this closely, both for safety and to prevent physical distress that could lead to disruption. Another subtle but critical feature is the sightline management. Tinted windows or frosted barriers ensure the inmate cannot clearly see the route. This prevents them from identifying landmarks or calculating escape possibilities. Officers, however, retain full visibility through driver windows and external mirrors. Even the seating arrangement has purpose. The inmate usually sits farthest from the door, requiring officers to control the entire space if entry is needed. This reduces the chance of sudden lunges when doors open. Before departure, officers walk around the vehicle, checking every latch, every door, every anchor. A supervisor signs off with a written record that the vehicle is secure. This documentation becomes part of the chain of custody log, proving that everything was done according to protocol. When the doors close and lock, the vehicle becomes a moving fortress, quiet, controlled, and built to disappear into everyday traffic. But the goal is not intimidation. The goal is containment, predictability, and protection for everyone involved. By the time the transport vehicle leaves the Sallyport, it carries more than a single inmate. It carries the weight of Texas's highest security procedures designed to ensure nothing interrupts the silent journey ahead. When a death row inmate is transported in Texas, the route they travel is never random. It is one of the most carefully protected parts of the entire operation. Unlike general inmate movements, these routes are designed with secrecy, unpredictability, and layered security in mind. A single predictable pattern could expose officers to unnecessary risks, so Texas builds every journey around controlled uncertainty. Planning begins days before the transfer. Specialized transportation supervisors examine maps, traffic reports, road construction zones, major events, and even weather patterns. They analyze the safest paths from the sending unit to the receiving location, whether it is the Polunsky unit, the Walls unit in Huntsville, a courthouse, or a medical facility. The route is drawn in stages, with alternate paths for every section. If a highway becomes blocked, if traffic slows suddenly, or if officers see anything suspicious, the convoy can shift instantly without hesitation. Texas does not allow ordinary correctional staff to know the exact route ahead of time. Only the transport team, supervisors, and a small communications group inside the regional command center have the full details. Even then, the route might be adjusted minutes before the vehicle leaves the sally port. This layer of secrecy protects both staff and inmate from potential interference. Before the transport begins, officers scout the chosen route. This can be done physically, driving through the roads the day before, or electronically by monitoring traffic patterns and weather forecasts. The goal is simple: eliminate uncertainty. High-crime areas, narrow streets, and crowded urban routes are avoided whenever possible. Roads with quick access to law enforcement support are preferred. This ensures officers never travel through an area where backup would be slow. Texas also considers escape attempts in its planning. An inmate cannot escape from inside a moving steel compartment, but external threats, attempted vehicle interference, accidents, or deliberate roadblocks must be accounted for. Routes with fewer choke points, fewer long stops, and fewer uncontrolled intersections reduce these risks. Even railroad crossings are evaluated, since delays at a train line could trap the convoy in open view. Communication plays a huge role. As the vehicle moves, officers relay real-time updates to the command center. If traffic unexpectedly builds, or if a detour appears, supervisors reroute instantly. The transport team follows orders without question, trusting the command center to maintain situational awareness that the officers on the ground might not have. Another key factor is timing. Texas rarely moves death row inmates in broad daylight, unless there is no alternative. Early morning hours provide empty roads, fewer pedestrians, and less public activity. This reduces attention and shortens travel times. If the trip must occur during peak hours, officers plan routes that avoid major highways, busy downtowns, or any predictable path the public might recognize. Convoy formation also influences route selection. While Texas sometimes uses a single unmarked transport vehicle, high-risk moves may include follow units or trailing officers. The route must accommodate multiple vehicles without attracting attention. Long stretches of rural roads or isolated highways help maintain control while keeping the operation discreet. Backup routes are as important as the primary path. Every route has at least 2 alternates, sometimes 3. If a secondary route becomes necessary, officers switch smoothly, without public announcements or visible signals. This prevents anyone, even unintentionally, from tracking their movement. Throughout the drive, officers maintain strict radio discipline. They do not announce city names, highway exit numbers, or specific landmarks over open channels. Instead, they use coded references and pre-designated checkpoints. The command center tracks the convoy's position without broadcasting sensitive details. This way, if anyone ever overheard a transmission, it would be meaningless without the internal reference sheet. As the vehicle gets closer to the destination, the route narrows into a controlled final approach. Officers avoid parking lots, crowded intersections, or areas with unpredictable foot traffic. They approach the receiving facility through secure access roads, often entering from the least visible side. The goal is always the same: minimize exposure. By the time the transport reaches its endpoint, the route planning has done its job. No delays, no surprises, and no unnecessary risks. To the public, the vehicle looks like just another van passing through traffic. But every mile was calculated, every intersection evaluated, and every turn chosen with purpose. For Texas, moving a death row inmate is not just a drive. It is a quiet security operation built on precision and secrecy. Once the transport vehicle leaves the sally port, control shifts from the extraction team inside the unit to the mobile escort team assigned to the journey. These officers form the backbone of Texas's high-risk inmate movement system. Their roles, communication methods, and structure are built on one idea: the transfer must stay predictable for staff and completely unpredictable for anyone outside the operation. Every escort team is organized under a clean chain of command. At the top is the transport supervisor, the officer responsible for the entire operation from start to finish. This supervisor communicates with the command center, directs the route adjustments, authorizes backups, and clears major decisions such as alternate paths, rest stops, or emergency procedures. Their job is not to drive the vehicle. It's to maintain situational awareness at all times. Below them is the lead transport officer, usually seated in the passenger seat. This officer monitors the driver, checks the environment outside the vehicle, tracks traffic, and scans for anything unusual. They are the eyes of the operation, constantly analyzing threats, choke points, and changes in road conditions. While the supervisor handles communication, the lead officer handles real-time decision-making inside the vehicle. The driver officer is trained specifically for high-risk inmate transport. They must anticipate sudden stops, quick lane changes, and unpredictable road hazards without compromising vehicle safety. Transport vehicles handle differently from regular cars. Reinforced compartments add weight, and restraint anchors limit inmate movement, so the driver adjusts their style to keep everything stable. If escort vehicles are used, they follow a deliberate formation. A shadow unit may trail behind at a distance, blending with traffic while maintaining visual contact. This trailing unit watches for unusual driver behavior, vehicles that repeatedly appear behind the convoy, or potential road interference. Their job is detection, not confrontation. Some routes may include a lead scout vehicle driving slightly ahead. This unit checks the road conditions, confirms choke points are clear, and identifies hazards before the main transport arrives. Scout drivers relay information through coded radio messages that only the transport team understands. Inside the main vehicle, officers monitor the inmate continuously. Even though restraints limit movement, officers check breathing patterns, body shifts, and tension levels. An inmate showing signs of panic, agitation, or manipulation can signal potential problems, so officers stay alert to any behavioral cues. Texas does not rely solely on equipment. Officer awareness is a critical layer of the system. Communication during the drive is tight and controlled. Radios operate on encrypted channels that connect the vehicle directly to the regional command center. Officers do not discuss specific locations, upcoming turns, or facility names over the air. Instead, they use predefined checkpoints labeled with code numbers. For example, passing point 2 to 7 might refer to a stretch of rural highway only the command center knows by that designation. This prevents anyone from tracking their path, even if a signal were intercepted. The escort team also maintains strict radio silence during sensitive moments, such as approaching intersections, merging onto highways, or entering high-traffic zones. Silence reduces distraction and helps the team concentrate on environmental risks. If the transport includes trailing or support units, each vehicle keeps a distance that looks natural to the public. They may not appear as a convoy at all, which is intentional. Texas avoids militarized or obvious escort formations that attract attention. For the public, it must look like ordinary traffic. Inside the command center, another chain of supervision monitors the journey. A movement controller tracks the progress using secure GPS systems that officers in the field cannot see. This ensures the escort team stays focused on the road rather than navigation. If something ahead becomes unsafe, a crash, a traffic jam, a protest, or emergency roadblock, the command center alerts the supervisor instantly and offers alternate paths already prepared. The incident response unit remains on standby during every death row movement. These officers do not appear unless needed, but they are ready to deploy quickly if an accident, medical emergency, or threat occurs. Their presence in the background ensures that even unexpected events have a structured response. For the escort team, maintaining calm is a professional requirement. They cannot show stress, speak carelessly, or lose their operational rhythm. Death row transports can last minutes or hours, but the mindset remains the same: steady, focused, and alert. By the time the convoy approaches its destination, the escort team begins final coordination with the receiving unit. The command center confirms that gates are secure, sally ports are cleared, and medical or supervisory staff are positioned. No vehicle turns into the facility until all internal systems are ready. From the outside, the team appears ordinary, just officers on a routine drive. But inside the escort vehicles, every second is controlled by a chain of command designed to keep danger away, maintain secrecy, and ensure the inmate arrives without disruption. Once the transport vehicle settles into the open road, the operation enters its longest and most fragile stage. The inmate is restrained, the escort team is in formation, and the route is set. But this is also the phase where unexpected problems are most likely to occur. Weather, accidents, public traffic, medical issues, or simple unpredictability can turn a routine transfer into a high-pressure situation. Because of this, Texas designs the entire ride around constant monitoring and total environmental control. Inside the transport compartment, the inmate has limited movement but is never out of sight. A small reinforced window between the officer's section and the inmate's compartment allows continuous visual supervision. Even in unmarked vehicles, this design ensures officers can watch posture changes, breathing patterns, or attempts to shift restraints. Officers are trained to recognize the earliest signs of agitation, panic, or manipulation. Even subtle movements matter. Texas officers understand that inmates often test boundaries during transport. Some may try to twist their hands, shift their leg irons, or pull on belly chains to check for weak points. Others might stay extremely still, which can be just as concerning. The escort team is trained to interpret silence, tension, or unusual calmness as part of the risk profile. The vehicle itself supports this monitoring. Many transport units have internal temperature controls, vibration sensors, and audio monitoring systems. Officers make sure the compartment remains cool in the Texas heat and warm during cold seasons. Sudden temperature discomfort can trigger anxiety or aggression, so climate stability is treated as a security priority. Risk management inside the vehicle also includes medical awareness. Officers know that restraints combined with long travel times can cause circulation issues, breathing discomfort, or stress reactions. If the inmate begins showing signs of medical distress, labored breathing, slumping, complaints of sharp pain, officers have a strict protocol. They notify the command center, request medical clearance, and, if necessary, divert to the nearest pre-approved medical point. However, these diversions are done under extreme control, with backup units joining the scene. On the road, officers constantly scan the environment. Heavy traffic, slow-moving trucks, aggressive drivers, and unexpected road closures all pose risks. The lead officer watches mirrors, shoulder lanes, and vehicles that appear multiple times. Suspicious behavior, a car following too closely or changing lanes unusually often, triggers a soft alert within the team. They don't stop immediately, but they adjust speed, spacing, and route to avoid any potential threat. Texas also prepares for accident scenarios, even though they rarely occur. If the transport vehicle becomes involved in a crash, the protocol is clear and unforgiving. The inmate remains seated, still restrained, while officers secure the scene. No one removes restraints unless the inmate faces immediate medical danger. Backup units arrive before any outside responders approach the compartment. Even paramedics follow strict orders when treating a death row inmate on the roadside. Radio communication remains controlled throughout the journey. Officers send brief, coded updates when crossing checkpoints. They avoid announcing specific cities or exits. Instead, they use time-stamped markers recognized only by the command center. This reduces the risk of route interception and keeps the operation invisible to the public. One often overlooked risk is public curiosity. An unmarked transport vehicle might attract attention if drivers notice officer behavior or unusual vehicle design. To avoid this, officers maintain normal driving patterns. No speeding, no sudden lane changes, no aggressive maneuvers unless necessary. The vehicle must appear like a typical van or government service unit. This calm presentation prevents unnecessary stares or speculation. The inmate rarely speaks during the journey. Some remain silent for hours. Others ask questions, often trying to guess the distance or route. Officers do not respond with details. Conversation stays minimal and professional. Sit back. Remain still. We'll arrive shortly. No hints, no information, no opportunity for the inmate to map the trip mentally. Rest breaks are almost non-existent. If absolutely required, officers use pre-cleared secure areas, never random gas stations or public rest stops. Even these secure areas are approached with extreme caution. Doors are not opened unless all officers are positioned, radio checks are complete, and surroundings are fully clear. As the vehicle approaches its destination, whether Huntsville for execution procedures, Polunsky for intake, or a high-security courthouse, the tension does not decrease. Officers know that final approach routes often pose the highest risk of interference due to slower traffic, narrow access roads, or public visibility. That is why the command center increases check-ins during the last miles. By the time the transport reaches the facility gate, the operation has passed through hundreds of small risk calculations. Nothing about the ride is simple. Every minute is controlled, monitored, and adjusted to keep the journey stable and silent. A death row transport may appear uneventful from the outside, but inside the vehicle and across the communication network, it remains one of Texas's most tightly managed security operations. Approaching the destination marks the beginning of a new phase in the transfer, controlled reception. Long before the transport team reaches the gate, the receiving facility has already shifted into a heightened state of readiness. Extra officers are positioned near sally ports, internal hallways are cleared, and movement inside the unit slows to prevent any unexpected encounters. Everyone involved knows that the final moments of a death row transfer demand the same precision as extraction. The escort supervisor makes a coded radio call to confirm the convoy's approach. Inside the facility, staff secure the first barrier, the outer gate. No vehicle is allowed entry until the gate operator confirms visual clearance. Only after the gate closes behind the transport can the inner sally port open. This double-gated system prevents intrusion, escape attempts, or accidental contact with unauthorized personnel. As the vehicle rolls inside, officers do not relax. They shift into a tighter formation, watching every angle, every corner, every person in sight. At high-security locations like Polunsky or the Walls unit in Huntsville, the sally port becomes a sealed chamber where control belongs entirely to the receiving team. The escort officers keep the vehicle doors locked until the receiving supervisor gives the signal. Inside the sally port, a small reception team waits with documentation, restraint keys, and medical observation tools. They are trained specifically for high-risk arrivals. Their first task is verification. They check transport logs, inmate movement orders, and identity documents to ensure the right inmate is being delivered. Nothing proceeds without a match. Texas requires strict chain of custody accuracy, and even minor errors can halt the process. Only after verification does the unloading procedure begin. Officers position themselves around the vehicle in a semicircle, creating a secure perimeter. Every officer knows exactly where to stand. These placements are not random. They are designed to prevent lunges, sudden movements, or blind spots. The escort team unlocks the door slowly, allowing the supervisor to visually inspect the inmate before any movement occurs. The inmate is instructed to adjust posture, show hands, and remain completely still. Additional officers look for tension in the shoulders, unusual breathing patterns, or attempts to manipulate restraints. Even after a long journey, the approach remains disciplined. The inmate is helped out of the vehicle one controlled step at a time, ensuring no opportunity for imbalance or resistance. Once on the ground, a fresh set of officers takes over the escort position. Texas separates transport teams from intake teams to keep responsibilities clear and prevent fatigue from compromising safety. These new officers perform a quick restraint check, tugging on chains, confirming locks, and ensuring nothing loosened during the ride. From the sally port to the intake area, the path is cleared in advance. Doors are opened only when the escort team reaches them, then shut immediately. In units like Polunsky, this path may include multiple security checkpoints, each designed to isolate movement and eliminate exposure to other inmates. Inside the intake room, the inmate undergoes a second round of verification. This includes confirming identity through ID numbers, wristbands, and written movement orders. Officers document the inmate's condition, checking for injuries, swelling from restraints, or signs of distress. This documentation protects both staff and inmate, ensuring transparency throughout the process. If the inmate is arriving for a court hearing, the procedure is similar but adapted for the courthouse environment. Deputies coordinate with the transport team, securing hallways, elevators, and holding cells before the inmate enters the public building. Court transfers often involve additional agencies, but Texas maintains control over the inmate until the moment they are officially handed over. For inmates arriving at Huntsville ahead of execution procedures, the process becomes even more structured. Movement is strictly timed, medical evaluations are immediate, and psychological assessments occur shortly after arrival. Every step is recorded in detail, and no unnecessary communication is allowed. The atmosphere during these arrivals is quiet, controlled, and deeply procedural. Once all intake steps are complete, the receiving supervisor signs the final acceptance form. Only then is the transport team officially relieved of custody. They perform a brief debriefing, inspect their vehicle, and secure equipment before departing the facility. To the outside world, the arrival may seem small, just a van entering a gate. Inside the system, it is a carefully orchestrated conclusion to a high-risk operation that required silence, discipline, and total coordination from start to finish. Even with layers of planning, rehearsed procedures, and strict command structure, Texas understands that no transport system is immune to unexpected problems. Equipment can fail, weather can shift suddenly, roads can shut down without warning, and although extremely rare, inmates may attempt to exploit any moment of weakness. Because of this, the state builds every death row transfer around redundancy, multiple backup plans stacked on top of each other, ready to activate the moment something goes off script. Mechanical issues are among the most common risks. A flat tire, battery problem, or sudden engine fault can create an exposed moment on the roadside. Texas prepares for this by scheduling maintenance before every transport and keeping replacement vehicles stationed at strategic points along longer routes. If a breakdown occurs, officers never attempt repairs alone. They immediately call for a backup vehicle while maintaining a defensive formation around the original transport. The inmate remains restrained, still anchored inside, until the fresh vehicle arrives. The swap is completed quickly, with officers surrounding all entrances to prevent exposure to the public. Another challenge is unpredictable public environments. A sudden traffic jam, a crash blocking the road, or even a large public event can threaten the smooth flow of the convoy. Texas avoids relying on a single predetermined route. Each transport includes alternate paths for every segment of the trip. If traffic locks up unexpectedly, the escort supervisor switches routes without hesitation. This flexibility prevents the convoy from becoming a stationary target or attracting attention from drivers around them. Severe weather brings its own risks. Heavy rain can reduce visibility, flooding can block rural roads, and fog can obscure sightlines during early morning drives. Transport supervisors stay in constant communication with command centers that monitor weather radar. If conditions become too hazardous, the team may delay movement temporarily at a controlled checkpoint, waiting for safer conditions before proceeding. The inmate never leaves the vehicle during these pauses. Officers keep eyes on surroundings and maintain secure radio contact. Human behavior is another unpredictable factor. Inmates rarely act out during death row transfers due to the heavy restraints and tight control, but officers still plan for resistance. If an inmate attempts to twist restraints, rock the seat, or shout to disrupt focus, officers do not engage in conversation or argue. They follow a behavior management protocol designed to stabilize the situation while maintaining control. In extreme cases, such as medical collapse, panic reaction, or dangerous physical struggling, the team can divert to a secure facility for assistance, but the inmate remains fully restrained at all times. External interference is the scenario Texas hopes never to face but prepares for with absolute seriousness. A vehicle behaving erratically behind the convoy, a driver aggressively cutting lanes, or a suspicious car trailing too closely triggers immediate internal alerts. Escort officers adjust spacing, activate backup routes, or slow movement to assess the behavior. If the situation escalates, the team can call for state trooper intervention. These troopers are briefed to treat such calls with high priority, ensuring rapid response without revealing the nature of the transport. Inside the command center, fail-safes continue operating in the background. GPS trackers allow supervisors to follow the convoy without officers announcing physical locations over the radio. If radio communication drops, whether due to dead zones or equipment faults, the command center knows instantly and attempts reconnection through alternate channels. If reconnection fails, a standby officer initiates contingency procedures to restore contact or dispatch support units. Medical emergencies present a unique risk. In a confined space with full restraints, even minor health issues can escalate quickly. Officers are trained to identify early warning signs: difficulty breathing, chest pain, slumping posture, or loss of responsiveness. When symptoms appear, the response becomes a coordinated sequence. Inform command, divert to a designated secure medical point, and request backup. Paramedics cannot approach the inmate until officers take full positional control and the environment is secure. Even then, restraints remain unless there is a risk to the inmate's life. Occasionally, external circumstances force an unplanned pause: a wildfire crossing a highway, a chemical spill closing a major route, or a police emergency blocking an area. In these rare moments, officers transition to holding protocols. The convoy stops only in pre-evaluated safe zones such as rural pull-offs away from public traffic, fenced state properties, or controlled areas cleared through law enforcement. The goal is always to avoid stopping where civilians might approach. Despite these challenges, Texas's layered planning keeps transport failures extremely rare. Every weakness has a backup, and every backup has a failsafe. Even when conditions shift unexpectedly, the transport team adapts with a calm, trained response. Their mindset is simple: control what can be controlled, respond instantly to what cannot, and never allow improvisation to replace procedure. By the time the operation concludes, a complex web of preparation, vigilance, and redundancy has quietly absorbed every risk that emerged along the way. The public never sees these moments, and that is the point. A smooth transfer is often the result of countless invisible corrections made behind the scenes to keep the system stable. Texas death row transport is a system built on silence, precision, and absolute control. Every step, from planning and extraction to the final gate at the receiving facility, is designed to eliminate risk and prevent disruption. Most people never witness these movements, and that's intentional. The operation works best when it remains invisible. Behind the scenes, officers follow a structure shaped by decades of experience, hard lessons, and the understanding that even routine transfers carry real consequences. What looks simple from the outside is the result of hundreds of coordinated decisions, all moving in the same direction: secure, quiet, and tightly managed. In the end, Texas's approach to death row transport reflects a system where secrecy is not a luxury, it is a requirement. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to HFD Achieve Crimes. Your comments help the channel grow, so drop your thoughts below and let me know what documentary you want next.